After the age of 60, something begins happening inside your eye that most people never hear about. Not from their optometrist, not from their primary care doctor, and certainly not from any medication they are already taking. There is a layer of cells at the back of your eye, roughly the thickness of a single sheet of paper, that functions as the biological support system for everything you see. And after the age of 60, those cells start disappearing at a rate that accelerates with every passing year. This is not a symptom. It is not blurriness or dryness or light sensitivity. This is a structural collapse happening beneath the surface of your vision, quietly, years before you notice anything is wrong. Hi, I'm Dr. Warner. I've spent over 2 decades working with patients over the age of 60 in clinical eye care and age-related vision research. What I'm going to explain to you today changed how I think about the morning routines of every single patient in my practice. Because there is a root vegetable, one most people already have in their refrigerator, that addresses the 3 core mechanisms behind accelerating vision loss after 60. And what the research shows about how it does this is something I want to walk you through, step by step, so you understand exactly what is happening in your body and exactly why this matters, starting today. Before we talk about the vegetable, I need to explain what is actually happening inside the aging eye, because most people think of vision loss as something that just happens with age, the way hair goes gray or knees start aching. That framing is wrong, and that framing is why millions of people lose vision they could have protected. Your eye contains a structure at its back wall called the retinal pigment epithelium. Researchers refer to it as the RPE. Think of it like the maintenance crew for your photoreceptors. Those are the light-sensing cells that actually create your vision. Every single day, your photoreceptors generate toxic waste. Old damaged outer segments of the rod and cone cells peel off and need to be cleared. The RPE is responsible for collecting and digesting that waste. It also transports nutrients from the blood supply below into the photoreceptors above. It regulates the fluid environment. It neutralizes oxidative damage. It does, in short, nearly everything that keeps your photoreceptors alive and functional. Here is what the published research shows happens to those RPE cells as you age. A 2023 study published in the journal Neurobiology of Aging found measurable RPE cell loss with age, with an accelerated decline in phagosome processing capacity in older tissue. Essentially, the cells that remain start failing at their core job of clearing photoreceptor waste. Debris accumulates. Lipofuscin, a toxic byproduct, builds up inside the RPE cells themselves. Bruch's membrane, the thin layer beneath the RPE through which nutrients pass, thickens and becomes less permeable. The choroidal blood vessels supplying oxygen to the entire back of the eye begin to narrow with age. The photoreceptors above, increasingly starved of nutrients and choked by accumulating waste, begin to die. This is the biology behind age-related macular degeneration, the leading cause of irreversible blindness in people over 65 in developed countries. AMD is projected to affect 288 million people worldwide by 2040. That number exists because the biological process I just described is happening in aging eyes everywhere, and most people do not know it is happening until significant permanent damage has already occurred. Now here is the part of this that matters for what comes next. This process does not operate through a single mechanism. It operates through 3 parallel biological failures that accelerate together. The first is oxidative stress. The retina operates in one of the most oxidatively demanding environments in the human body. It is exposed to constant light, it has extremely high metabolic activity, and the photoreceptor membranes contain large amounts of polyunsaturated fatty acids that are highly vulnerable to oxidative damage. When the retina's antioxidant defense systems become insufficient, which happens progressively after 60, reactive oxygen species accumulate faster than they can be neutralized. RPE cells begin dying, photoreceptors follow. The second mechanism is vascular. Your photoreceptors and RPE cells are fed by a network of blood vessels in the choroid, directly beneath the back wall of your eye. When those vessels narrow, or when blood flow becomes restricted, the RPE and photoreceptors are deprived of oxygen and nutrients. This is how vision loss from glaucoma begins. The optic nerve, the cable that carries visual signals from the retina to the brain, requires steady, well-regulated blood flow to survive. When ocular blood pressure becomes dysregulated, and when the pressure inside the eye rises because fluid cannot drain efficiently, those optic nerve fibers begin dying. Glaucoma affects over 3 million Americans and is the second leading cause of blindness worldwide. The third mechanism is nitric oxide deficiency. This is the one I want to spend the most time on because this is the one that connects directly to what you can eat this week. Nitric oxide is a gas produced naturally by the cells lining your blood vessels. In the eye, it does two critical things. First, it regulates intraocular pressure by controlling the outflow of fluid through the trabecular meshwork, the drainage system of your eye. When nitric oxide levels fall, that meshwork stiffens. Fluid cannot drain. Pressure builds. Second, nitric oxide dilates the blood vessels, supplying the optic nerve and the retina. When nitric oxide is insufficient, those vessels constrict, blood flow to the optic nerve slows, and nerve fibers that depend on that flow begin to degenerate. Researchers at Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School published a landmark analysis in JAMA Ophthalmology following more than 104,000 people across two large prospective cohorts, the Nurses' Health Study and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study, for nearly 3 decades. They found that higher dietary nitrate intake was associated with a 20 to 30% lower risk of primary open-angle glaucoma overall. For the subtype of glaucoma specifically linked to impaired blood flow autoregulation in the optic nerve, the risk reduction was 40 to 50%. Dietary nitrate raises nitric oxide, and nitric oxide protects the eye through the exact two pathways I just described. Now here is where the root vegetable enters. Beetroot, also known simply as beets, is one of the most concentrated dietary sources of inorganic nitrate found anywhere in the food supply. The nitrate in beets is absorbed in the upper digestive tract, converted to nitrite by bacteria in the mouth and gut, and then reduced to nitric oxide throughout the body and specifically within vascular tissue. The effect is measurable, dose-dependent, and begins within hours of consumption. But nitrate and nitric oxide is only the first mechanism. There is a second compound in beets that addresses the oxidative stress problem directly, and the way it works is genuinely remarkable. Beets contain a class of pigments called betalains. These are the compounds responsible for the deep red and purple color of the vegetable. Betalains are powerful antioxidants, and a 2024 review published in the journal Foods examined their pharmacological mechanisms in detail. Betalains scavenge free radicals and reduce oxidative stress, but what makes them distinct is how they do it. Rather than simply neutralizing free radicals directly, betalains activate a transcription factor inside your cells called NRF2. This is sometimes called the master regulator of the antioxidant response. When NRF2 is activated, your cells switch on their own internal antioxidant enzyme systems, including superoxide dismutase and glutathione peroxidase, the same enzymes that your retinal pigment epithelium depends on to survive its daily oxidative environment. Here is what matters about that. Researchers studying RPE cell death in the context of age-related macular degeneration have repeatedly identified NRF2 activity as a central protective mechanism. A 2025 review in the International Journal of Molecular Sciences examining oxidative stress in RPE cells described NRF2 as a primary redox-sensing transcription factor that controls the antioxidant defense system of the entire RPE layer. Mice deficient in the upstream regulator of NRF2 developed progressive RPE degeneration and drusen deposits resembling dry AMD. Compounds that activate NRF2 protected against that degeneration. Betalains from beets activate NRF2 through documented molecular pathways. This is not a leap of speculation. This is a direct mechanistic connection from a food to a documented protective pathway in the very cells that are failing in aging eyes. There is a second piece of this story that runs even deeper. And I want to explain it because once you understand it, the daily habit I am going to give you will make complete biological sense. Inside your RPE cells sit mitochondria. These are the organelles that produce the cellular energy your RPE cells need to perform all of their functions. Every act of phagocytosis, every nutrient transport event, every antioxidant enzyme activation requires mitochondrial energy. In aging RPE, mitochondrial function declines. Mitochondrial DNA is particularly susceptible to the oxidative damage that accumulates in the retinal environment. As mitochondrial efficiency falls, the RPE cells produce less energy, perform their functions more slowly, generate more oxidative waste, and eventually die. Research published in the journal Frontiers in Neuroscience examining the pathogenesis of AMD described mitochondrial dysfunction as a core feature of RPE degeneration with aging. The betalains in beets, through their NRF2 activation pathway, have been shown to support mitochondrial function by reducing the oxidative damage that causes mitochondrial DNA degradation. Meanwhile, the nitric oxide produced from beet nitrate improves the blood supply to the choroid, increasing the oxygen and nutrient delivery that mitochondria depend on to function. These two mechanisms operate in parallel and reinforce each other. Better blood supply plus reduced oxidative damage equals better mitochondrial function in the RPE cells that protect your photoreceptors. Now I want to talk about the specific protocol, because the dose, the timing, the preparation, and the form of beets all affect how much of this mechanism actually reaches your eyes. Let me start with the most important detail, which most people get wrong. Not all forms of beet are equivalent. Fresh cooked beets, beet juice, and beet powder all deliver betalains and nitrate, but in meaningfully different concentrations. The research on nitrate delivery and its vascular effects has been conducted primarily using beet juice. Whole cooked beets contain both compounds, but in lower concentrations per gram than juice. Beet powder varies enormously by manufacturer and processing method. For the purpose of this protocol, I am going to give you options at each tier. The most effective option, supported by the clearest dose-response data, is 70 to 140 milliliters of concentrated beet juice daily. This is roughly 2.5 to 5 ounces, which is the range used in cardiovascular and blood pressure research and corresponds to approximately 200 to 400 milligrams of nitrate. Look for products that contain no added sugar and are cold-pressed or minimally processed to preserve betalain content. Some products specifically market themselves for nitrate content. Read the label. You want concentrated beet juice, not beet juice blend, not beet-flavored drink. The second option is whole-cooked beets. One medium beet contains roughly 100 to 150 milligrams of nitrate, depending on growing conditions. Eating 2 medium beets daily provides a meaningful nitrate dose. You lose some efficiency compared to juice, but you gain fiber and other micronutrients. Roasting beets rather than boiling them preserves more betalain content. Boiling leaches both nitrate and betalains into the water. If you boil beets, drink the cooking water. If you roast them, keep the cooking time under 1 hour at moderate heat. The third option is raw beet mixed into something else. Grating raw beet into a smoothie in the morning is one of the most effective methods for betalain preservation because betalains are heat sensitive. Raw beet grated or blended delivers the highest betalain concentration per gram of any preparation method. The texture in a smoothie is imperceptible. Half a medium raw beet, roughly 80 grams, provides an effective dose of both nitrate and betalains when consumed daily. Now, the timing matters. Here is why. Nitric oxide production from dietary nitrate depends on bacteria in your mouth converting nitrate to nitrite. Using mouthwash before consuming beets eliminates those bacteria and reduces nitric oxide production significantly. If you are using antibacterial mouthwash in the morning, use it at a different time of day. Do not brush and then immediately drink beet juice. Let the oral bacteria do their part of the conversion. Additionally, vitamin C enhances betalain absorption. Combining your beet preparation with something containing vitamin C, a half orange squeezed into beet juice, or berries in a beet smoothie, improves the bioavailability of both compounds. One more preparation note. Betalains are sensitive to heat and light. Fresh beet juice or raw beet should be consumed soon after preparation rather than stored for extended periods. If you are using packaged juice, keep it refrigerated and use it within a few days of opening. Let me tell you what to expect, and I want to frame this honestly because I do not believe in setting expectations that the science does not support. The nitric oxide pathway operates relatively quickly. Measurable increases in circulating nitric oxide occur within 2 to 3 hours of beet juice consumption and persist for several hours. This means that daily consumption maintains elevated nitric oxide throughout most of each day. In terms of eye pressure, the research on beetroot juice and intraocular pressure specifically is still early. The Scissorick and Randolph study from Southern College of Optometry measured intraocular pressure, blood pressure, and macular vessel density after beet juice consumption in healthy adults. They found significant reductions in blood pressure but noted that larger effects on intraocular pressure may require studies in people who already have elevated eye pressure or glaucoma. The Harvard cohort data, however, measured glaucoma incidence across nearly 3 decades in over 100,000 people. The association between dietary nitrate and lower glaucoma risk is robust and consistent. For the antioxidant and RPE protective mechanisms, the timeline is different. Building up NRF2-mediated antioxidant defense is a process that occurs over weeks and months of consistent dietary intake. The protective effects on RPE mitochondrial function accumulate gradually. This is not a 2-week intervention. This is a daily habit that, sustained over months and years, maintains the biological environment in which your RPE cells are more likely to survive and function. What this means in practice is this. If you are in your 60s and your vision is still good, starting this habit now is maintaining a protective environment before the structural damage has advanced. If you have already noticed changes in your central vision, increased difficulty with contrast, or have been told you have early signs of macular changes, the same mechanisms apply, but the urgency is higher. In either case, do not expect a week of beet juice to restore lost photoreceptors. That is not how cell biology works. What the evidence supports is that sustained dietary nitrate and betalain intake is associated with meaningful reductions in the risk of the diseases that cause irreversible vision loss and supports the biological health of the structures that keep existing vision intact. I also want to say something about what beets are not doing. Beets are not a pharmaceutical intervention. The research connecting dietary nitrate to lower glaucoma risk does not claim a cure. It establishes an association, identifies a plausible mechanism, and suggests that this is an area warranting further study. The NRF2 pathway research connects betalains to known protective mechanisms in RPE cells, but large randomized controlled trials specifically on beet consumption and AMD progression in humans are still being developed. I am telling you what the mechanisms are and what the research suggests, not what has been proven in long-term human intervention trials for every outcome. That distinction matters, and I will not blur it. There is a second layer to this that I want to add now, because beets alone address 3 of the critical mechanisms I described. But there is a fourth factor that determines whether the nitric oxide your body produces from beet nitrate can actually reach the tissues of your eye and do its job there. That factor is the health of the small blood vessels themselves, and that connects to something that happens in the eye after 60 that most people have never been told about. The choroidal blood vessels that feed the RPE and photoreceptors are among the smallest in the human body. Their inner walls, the endothelium, regulate vascular tone, manage blood flow, and produce nitric oxide locally. As these vessels age, the endothelium becomes progressively less responsive. Endothelial dysfunction is a central feature of aging vasculature, and it means that even if you increase circulating nitric oxide through diet, a damaged endothelium is less able to respond to that signal effectively. The betalains in beets, through their anti-inflammatory effects via NF-κB inhibition and their NRF2 activation, help maintain endothelial function by reducing the oxidative stress that damages endothelial cells. This is not a separate benefit layered on top of the nitrate mechanism. It is the mechanism that makes the nitrate mechanism work better. These 2 compounds in the same vegetable support the same biological pathway from 2 different angles. Now let me give you the practical protocol to start with. 1 small concentrated beet juice, roughly 70 to 100 milliliters, or 1/2 of a medium raw beet grated into a smoothie every morning before you eat breakfast. Combine it with a small amount of vitamin C from whole food, not a supplement if you can. Avoid using antibacterial mouthwash within 2 hours of consuming beets. Do not boil your beets if you are eating them whole. If you are roasting them, keep the temperature moderate and the cooking time reasonable. Do this daily, not 5 days a week. Daily. The nitrate-nitric oxide pathway requires consistent replenishment. The protective effects accumulate with sustained intake. Over the first 2 weeks, the most likely change you will notice is nothing specific to your vision. That is normal. The mechanisms at work here are not ones that produce immediate perceptual changes in healthy eyes. What is changing is the biochemical environment inside your eye. Nitric oxide availability, antioxidant enzyme expression, blood pressure in the vessels behind your retina. These are measurable at the cellular and vascular level before they register as visible changes in vision function. Over months of consistent intake, if you are monitoring your eye health with regular examinations, the markers that your eye doctor tracks, intraocular pressure, the appearance of the optic nerve, the status of the retinal pigment epithelium on OCT imaging, are the places where the effects of sustained dietary intervention are most likely to appear first. This is why I strongly encourage anyone over the age of 60 to have those baseline measurements taken and to continue monitoring them. Diet cannot protect what you cannot measure. The larger question this science raises is one worth sitting with. Your eyes are exposed to decades of light, oxidative stress, and progressively declining blood supply. The RPE cells that sustain your central vision are not replaced when they die. The photoreceptors they support are not regrown once they are lost. Age-related macular degeneration is the leading cause of blindness in the elderly precisely because the process that leads to it is silent, slow, and structural. By the time most people feel it, significant permanent damage has already occurred. What the evidence supports is not a reversal of that damage once it has happened. What it supports is that the nutritional environment in which your retinal cells operate matters in measurable ways. Dietary nitrate intake is associated with meaningfully lower glaucoma risk across decades of data in over 100,000 people. NRF2 activating compounds are associated with protection of the very cells whose failure defines the most common form of irreversible vision loss. And the root vegetable that contains the highest concentrations of both of these compounds, nitrate and betalains, is a beet. It costs under $2. It is available at every grocery store in the country, and the preparation requires nothing more than a grater, a juicer, or a knife. If you found this useful, please subscribe, and I will continue covering the mechanisms behind age-related vision changes and what the current research says about protecting your eyes over time. In the next video, I'm going to walk through what happens to the tear film after 60, why dry eye disease is not simply a matter of comfort but is a precursor to corneal damage and reduced visual acuity, and what specific compounds have been shown in randomized trials to support the structures that keep the surface of your eye intact. That video covers something that affects nearly 50% of people over 65, and almost nobody is addressing it at the level of the actual biology.